I just doing one of those videos where I'm not sure if I'll ever put it into a video or show or not. This is more of just like a diary thing, I guess. Absolutely stoned high, out of my mind on kind of full extract cannabis oil, or FICO, as some people call it. Um, and I think I just had just a slight amount more today. I was just trying to creep into the next stage of what I need to increase my tolerance level to, because you still have to consume a lot of this in order for it to actually be therapeutic, and that goes for all therapeutic drugs actually, because another drug that I'm scheduled to take in about half an hour or an hour or so is clomipramine. So that's a repurposed, off-label, if you like, prescribed to me. I was very lucky to get that prescribed, and that has shown in I think it was a phase 2 trial. So it did get quite advanced, the study on this. This phase 2 trial was conducted by Portsmouth University, um, and that this was before their more recent discovery, which went to that company in Bury, I think it's called, or Bury. That place, there's a company called, or a corporation called Innovate Pharmaceuticals. And last I heard, in I think 2016, I guess a patent or some kind of negotiation was happening between the researchers and whoever at this pharmaceutical company, to release it. I was told in a quote from someone I really trust in London, who's a very smart person and very well connected with brain cancer research. And I remember him telling me um, just about some of the corrupt stuff that goes on to delegitimize natural products like cannabis and so on, or literally anything where you can't make a synthetic version that you can be then in possession of a patent for, which could obviously earn you a lot of money. Um, and of course, these big corporations, they've got shareholders that are probably a lot richer than the people in that corporation. It's like a lot of these corporations, you'll find that the people who think they're at the top level there, they're actually in one of the most gutted considered places by the upper classes, because I think what's happened under neoliberalism, so it's not a very attractive word. Um, it kind of denotes like it's boring sort of thing, and it is. It's now considered, I think, centrist dad is the term for neoliberals that think it's the best thing ever. What I mean by neoliberal is somebody that just does not have the progress of humanity at the forefront of their agenda and their priorities. Because one of the worst symptoms of neoliberalism is how poisoned the politics is behind the way it's tied to capitalism, and there's a lot of this defence around it as well. I'll get to that bit in a bit, but the core of it in the UK, it's very centralised to that London bubble. Like I guess it's the Westminster bubble, and even like independent media that happens to be located at capital. So, for example, like Novara Media, who I guess are the UK's closest example of what's happening in America with the TYT network. And that's quite important because, there is absolutely no objection to the other terrors that come with neoliberalism, which are always supported in mainstream media. So quite a lot of the time, the thing that's so wrong and terrible about it, it's very hard to describe it because it's like a moving target where it's based on playing with morality, um, where they can, bend the rules and where they exploit grey areas and so on. Um, it's just that it seems to be to me, to my mind, that anybody that is proudly neoliberal and involved in politics, then they all tend to be quite in a high position. So they've been quite successful because I think it requires quite a ruthless personality to get quite up the chain in these political circles. And the interesting thing about the time that we're in at the moment is that a few progressives keep on sneaking through into positions of power um, for, for for reasons that are quite understandable actually, because it's basically neoliberalism kind of works in relying that most people don't know what it is. So no problem if you don't know what it is. Uh, no one asks, and that's fine. That means they're left to get on with what they want to do. And yeah, I just think it's you can even see it in Parliament. For example, when Jeremy Corbyn even brings up the term neoliberalism and why we need to clean Europe of this toxic form of politics that has this nice kind of calm veneer to it, but under the surface is it's fueled by corruption. Um, and I'm not talking about like a kind of nepotism based sort of family um, connection, like some powerful family. I'm not talking about certain races. It's a certain type of brain. So it's a brain that can be in any type of person that you can think of, in terms of the way they look, or the way they sound, or their personalities, even their culture. Um, there is no this problem of sociopathy, which it relies on. It's one of the things that neoliberalism relies on. Um, Sociopathy, it works a bit like the agenda that they're trying to move forward with this neoliberal project. Now, I do know what I'm talking about. I'm not like rambling out just a stoner's load of bullshit. These are things that I was going to write about, but before I was just so unable to move correctly to even balance while typing. So I was going to write an article, and that article was about Tulsi Gabbard basically being president, and how that's another example of a progressive, a genuine progressive, just slipping through into a position of power. And I truly believe she's one of the most likely candidates to do that. I know that the people who made Bernie Sanders so successful in 2016, I know that they're genuine progressives, and they have all switched to Tulsi Gabbard because it almost seems like we get these little bursts of progressivism into the political discourse of general life, and when that happens, it's kind of like after a while it fizzles out. It gets it starts to age very quickly, and it's kind of like I know Bernie Sanders is running again, but even Bernie Sanders has gone stale on certain foreign policies. For example, I think he's taken some terrible positions on Venezuela, because the mainstream media all over the West at the moment is trying to make sure as many people in normal life believe that Venezuela is a dictatorship, and that it's black and white. That's just how it is. There's no grey areas there. There's no nuance. It's very, they're treating it like a binary situation, where it's almost like when they lobbied for war in Iraq, these neocons in the US political system, the ones that are really powerful, they are able to influence and make sure that the gears of war or perpetual war just keep churning, so that military industrial complex is forever part of just like an integral part of the capitalist system. And if we can convince all these people that words like Marxism, which is quite a harsh sounding word, like Marxist, it sounds like an insult. It's not a pleasant word the way it sounds, in my opinion. And but I think the military-industrial complex really want people to fear the other, and it's red fear. They want you to fear the Russians. The Russians are our adversary. They want everyone to believe this. Now, it's unfortunately there are some bad actors that are definitely on the left, or sort of in a blurry position. It's hard to see where they stand, because it's on certain aspects they're your friend, and on another aspect they're like one of your worst enemy. For example, this is a dynamic example of a dynamic change. Tulsi Gabbard was almost written off at the very start of her campaign because she was smeared by the right-wing media, and even the Democratic media, liberal media, I would thought would be the best term for them in the US, that it would be what's the term? Right, so I was talking about Tulsi Gabbard, and right, okay, sorry. Sometimes I do this when I'm stuck this high. It's because I ramble too long. I need to be more concise. So I would say we are stuck in a stalemate situation at the moment, because Tulsi Gabbard in the US is now in a position where she relies on getting the Democratic nomination, but the process by which to do that is a corrupt one, which is designed to stop Tulsi becoming the nomination. Unfortunately, in the US, it seems that these neoliberals, these bad actors, if you will, they are very entrenched in positions of power, especially in their media. God knows how it got so popular in one area in Washington D.C. And I was going to put on my article how, you know, they have formulated such very clever ways to remain unseen among society. I mean, for example, it seems like something like it's taken us 20 years to label who these people are. When us progressives say that person's a neoliberal apologist, what we're referring to is something that we know to be insidious, that has evolved over time with vested interests in not being well known, just something that a natural aspect of the capitalist system. Just the way the corporations are, almost treated like they are a person. They're treated like they have more human rights than a human actually has. If that makes any sense, like they have more rights than a human. Basically, is what this neoliberalism, well, this flavour of it seems to want to put in place. And a lot of it's in terms of what's coming ahead in the future, I think can be positive. I mean, I do feel good about the future. Obviously at the moment I feel uncertain about my own. I do feel confident that I'm going to fight it a lot harder than I did last time, but I just don't know if that will be enough ultimately. But I'm going to try my hardest, and I think that'll be obvious in the way I approach this protocol. There is a confidence I find comfort in the research that's behind it. So this way I've been feeling recently, where I get just too high, at least I know that that's THC high. And it's funny, this is the thing that all these people are scared of. When it's like, you should be scared of not feeling that way. You should be scared of not feeling anything, because maybe your endocannabinoid system is significantly compromised, that it's hard for you to even feel the psychoactive effects of THC, or even the mild psychoactive effects of CBD. And I know a lot of people are experimenting with CBD now. Bless their hearts, it's just an isolate. So if it helps somebody, that's a bonus. But when you look at the fact that an unadulterated, well-grown cannabis plant, the bud from that plant will contain over 400 odd of these different cannabinoids and terpenes and flavonoids and so on. All of these things are uniquely anti-inflammatory, and here's the key. This is why isolates are not the way forward. The key is that enables the entourage effect. And now, I wouldn't have got to where I am now if I hadn't have benefited from the entourage effect happening in 2016 while I was having radiotherapy, because the cannabinoids were making the CB1 receptors on mutated cells where it's overproduced. It was making them overstimulated and therefore much more vulnerable to the X-rays that were being beamed through my head every weekday, about 35 times or so. That was, I feel like that was a standard of care that has a terrible track record when someone's relied on it. To rely on radiotherapy is an incredibly foolish thing to do if you want to survive brain cancer. But that's the same with anything. It's the same with cannabinoids, I'm afraid. We hear this term bandied around all the time, cure. Oh, you cannabis advocates are always saying it's a cure, and that's like giving people false hope and so on. And that's not the real cannabis community that ever says that, because everybody that's got half a brain cell in the UK cannabis community knows that the entourage effect is vitally important if you want it to be therapeutic, but also that the high is part of what's good, because that's where it is definitely working. And we know the science because we're a kind of a community that's been slated a lot, and it's kind of like people consider us lower class because a lot of us have dreads and so on. It's just a style that we happen to enjoy or celebrate in the culture of the cannabis community. And just because maybe that doesn't look good, it's all like it seems to be all the ones that you'd think maybe that doesn't look good with a suit. It seems to be how they pick out who they consider acceptable and who they consider unacceptable for their classes. And the neoliberal political class are they just consider that we're all stoners. That's the term that they'd probably use. And that, they're the sort of people that when we go to events like Product Earth, the people that are at the top of the pharmaceutical chain, or the top of the actual hard drugs game, which is obviously the case in a lot of places, a lot of different events, is we don't just have our own community. Every drug has its own community. I just think that the cannabis community is the most humanistic and the most progressive, and it's where the most good is going to come if the progressives are in charge, because the future's sensitive, fragile, and it needs that just extra caring that you can only find in a community of people who want this human experience to continue, not just for our own good, but for the good of the actual universe itself. Tulsi Gabbard on her campaign trail has been saying a lot of how she wants to spread aloha around the world, and that basically means love. It doesn't mean just hello. It means she wants to spread love around the world. So call me a hippie, but that sounds amazing. And when you combine that with what I know scientifically about the universe, my astrological intelligence, I'm not saying that I'm the most scientifically literate person, but I do definitely understand the basic fundamentals of space-time and gravity, the Newton's laws and so on. The way things move in space and so on, and some of the rules that apply that we see through biology, because I've had to wise up in so many different ways over the past 3 years. I don't want to blow my own trumpet or anything. I'm not saying I'm a genius now, because I'm finding that there's no such thing as a genius. You can only just continually keep filling your brain with new information, and you won't notice that you'll forget things that are no longer important and insignificant, and those neurons will just take over with this new important information. So it's not like your brain has a limit on what you can learn. You basically slide down the pole of knowledge when you're in that experience, you're going one way, and you'll pick up everything as you go, and the things that are no longer important will just be insignificant and go away. It'll be like just moving through clouds, like just different layers, and some will become the oldest will become insignificant, and you'll just forget those, and then the memories that are present and most significant, or potentially connected with future events. When you're analysing how your own future could be, because the brain is never just along for the ride, just picking up memories, because we actually need to move these bodies, and we need to engage the neocortex for that. See, my worry with my diagnosis is I worry about losing useful parts of my neocortex, because it's a right side frontal brain tumour that I was diagnosed with, and I'm just worried about the amount of accumulative damage that I'm going to be sustaining in my neocortex, and how that will affect who I am as a person in the future. That is a bit of a worry for me, and why I'm interested in neurogenesis, so like safely rebuilding healthy brain tissue, and to be honest, the amount of learning that I do is what keeps that working for me. Is what makes it feel like I'm making progress and I'm killing these cancer cells, because I'm learning so much more. Excuse me. And I just this is really going on for a long video now. I wish I could be more concise, so apologies for that. I do a lot of rambling when I'm doing a kind of diary video, but this is my second round of TMZ chemotherapy. That's temozolomide, to treat a recurrence of a grade 3 anaplastic astrocytoma. So I was just slightly unlucky in not destroying enough cancer stem cells, because it's an ongoing process. You have to continually make sure it's an environment that's not suitable for a cancer stem cell, and so that's what I've got to really go after with my diet going forward. And a key part of that is obviously the cannabinoids as well, because that entourage effect is going to be the key thing here, because if that's happening at the same time as whatever the chemotherapy is doing, which is on its own poor at passing through the blood-brain barrier, and has a poor history of being useful in any way with people diagnosed with grade 3s for some reason. I was told that I had this mutation that does make it seem that I would respond to temozolomide. So this is the ID H1 or something. Can't remember the actual name of that. And that means that there's a higher chance of me going back into remission. So remission would be seeing the tumour actually shrinking, so not progressing, like growing or any way, or even to see if it's arrested the growth of it, so that it's neither shrinking but importantly not growing any more than it is. And it was a bit of a crash protocol when I was first diagnosed with this recurrence, that was a crash protocol, was to really go for that in terms of I need to sleep. I need to have a good sleep pattern. I need to be in anti-inflammatory based lighting when I can, avoid blue light at a late hour, and try and keep a good routine with maybe a melatonin supplement to accompany a therapeutic cycle of clomipramine, which I'm sure I was trying to mention earlier was a repurposed drug that has been found at quite a high dose to be therapeutic against brain tumours. And I remember saying that was the one that made it up to a phase 2 trial. So there's some good evidence that has a potential of working. So I'm cycling up on that, and I'm guessing I'm taking around about 150 milligrams at the moment. So probably another 50 before I'm in the therapeutic range. Although the therapeutic range is said to be 200 milligrams, but I still have quite a fast metabolism, so and I'm still quite thin, so it may be fairly significantly lower. So it could be like 150 is therapeutic for me. But obviously, the more body mass you have, the more the harder it is for that to absorb, sort of thing. So that's just one advantage of being quite skinny at the moment. So I don't know if there's anything else to say. I've got to go take my anti-sickness stuff now. So, right, thanks very much for listening. And I'll probably do another video shortly later on what it's like on the other side of this. Alright, so peace everyone, and look after yourselves. Alright, take care.